My name is Bud Mortensen. I want to just make a few opening remarks to welcome you to the Deputy Vice-Chancellor and Principal's Town Hall, a semi-annual activity to provide an update. This is our spring update for 2016. We will hear from Professor Deborah Buzzard, our Deputy Vice-Chancellor, in just a moment. And following her remarks, we'll have a question and answer session, welcoming questions from the audience. And moderating the Q&A today is Dr. Carrie Doberstein, Associate Professor of Political Science in the Barber School of Arts and Sciences. So I will invite Professor Buzzard up to make her remarks.
Thank you, Bud. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you all very much for taking time out to join us this afternoon. Let me begin by respectfully acknowledging the traditions and customs of the Okanagan Nation and its peoples in whose traditional territories we are gathered today and for whom we have to thank for this wonderful Okanagan campus. Since we came together for the Town Hall event last fall, a number of members of our campus community have passed on. I will ask that you please join me for a moment of silence to honor the memories of 4 of our students who lost their lives over the course of this academic year: Lauren Kruger, Gavin Dallowal, Curtis Schopf, and Paul Jubenville. With great sadness, we also recognize the passing of our dear friends and colleagues, Richard Garvin and Spiro Yiannakopoulos. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. I'd like to thank all of you who attended services for the students, I know many of you did, and the celebrations of life for Richard and Spiro, and also a little bit further away in time, those who attended the dedication ceremony in the fall for the revitalization of the Old Pond Trail in memory of Al King. I'd like to thank everyone who made that trail project possible, and many people contributed to it financially. It's simply marvelous to see how much use that trail system is getting, and I think it gets better every year. It's great to have that legacy of Al for our whole campus forever. And thank you all for coming out. I apologize for canceling earlier. I was really quite sick. I think many people got quite sick with flus and colds this winter, and I was certainly taken down by one. It reminded me that my mother was actually correct. You should not try and soldier on. You get better more quickly if you go to bed. And I've taken back her advice. I could hear her voice. It was quite something. Anyway, as a reminder of why we do this event, it is an opportunity to report back on some of the highlights and issues of the past year. And of course, it's been quite a year. We celebrated UBC's centennial, and our 10th anniversary is just winding down. So it's timely to look back on what I will have to call a mixed bag. We've had great celebrations and achievements, but we've also had, I would say, more than our share of negative press coverage and difficult issues and serious questioning of the governance of our great university. One issue that has been discussed widely this year, here and elsewhere, is sexual violence. Sexual assault is, of course, an issue of serious concern wherever it happens, and we know it's widespread across society. But be assured, our university is not shying away from taking on this problem. As places that stand for universal inclusivity, safety, and equity, universities must lead in this area with an exemplary response. As centers for discussion and critical reflection, we should also play a central role in the broader cultural conversation on preventing sexual violence. Most of you will have seen the broadcast email that went out earlier this week. It highlights the activities that are going on at UBC to coordinate strategies to improve policies and practices that address sexual assault and sexual harassment in our community. This work includes a volunteer panel led by Professor of Law Janine Benedette to outline action items in relation to prevention, response, institutional accountability, and the overall UBC climate around sexual violence. As well, development of a sexual assault policy is underway. And no doubt you've also seen that the BC government is taking an interest in all post-secondary institutions developing such policies. A draft of ours will be delivered to the Board of Governors in June, at which point the university community will all be invited to provide feedback, and I would encourage you to do so. It's been a very interesting conversation at the executive table. Bear in mind that our president was president first 20 years ago and has not been actively involved in university life for the last decade. I would say she is astounded at where things have moved socially in the last 20 years. And I think we sometimes forget how quickly things have moved with the advent of social media and really the youth behavior in general. I want to be clear that UBC will not tolerate sexual assaults, and we are absolutely committed to ensuring that the university is a safe and supportive environment for all. The second item I want to briefly address is the UBC presidential search. I'm sure many of you join me in keenly anticipating the selection of a new president. It's my hope that the next president will, among other things, help to heal and bring together our community after a number of difficult circumstances and conversations over the past year, including issues relating to university governance. I have no doubt that the search committee will find a wonderful president, and I'm looking forward to onboarding them to our campus. And just an aside here, I'm in my 4th year, and that will be my 4th president. I'm getting used to onboarding people. It's a regular occurrence. I hope it's the last time I have to do it. University governance is, of course, the other serious issue that I wanted to address. I will say, personally, I welcomed the recent conversations on institutional governance. As I said earlier, universities are places for open dialogue on difficult issues, and indeed are founded on the principle of free inquiry and expression. And of course, critiques of oneself often provide opportunities for improvement. I was very encouraged by the open and frank conversation that took place at the last board meeting with representatives of the UBC community, including our faculty association and other employee groups. And I was especially pleased to see a live video link established to allow for virtual attendance at the meeting. I hope some of you took the time to follow the discussion on video, perhaps not the most gripping of TV ever, perhaps a little along the lines of CPAC without the diverse characters, but it was a first for UBC, and it signals great board and a much more meaningful opportunity for our campus to be included in board governance from the perspective of the average person at UBC rather than our wonderful board representatives who do a fine job, but this will allow us to see them in action, board working. I hope that the university will continue with these video broadcasts of the board open meetings. I want to express my own confidence in the fundamentals of UBC's system of governance. I've been lucky enough to work at 3 great universities. I'm a strong believer in what is called a bicameral model of university governance. A board of governors for institutional oversight and Senate. Is that better? All right. It's just like TV. When something goes wrong, they have to rush on and help the announcer. Having a board and a Senate is critical to being a great university. UBC is very well served by its senates, and we're lucky enough in some ways to have 3. 2 perhaps might be enough, but 3 is even better. These senates are vested with the responsibility for the academic governance of the university. The Okanagan Senate and the Vancouver Senates are both strong, quite appropriately, thanks to the leadership and commitment of the academics, students, and academic administrators who participate in them. As much as the next president will have responsibility for helping us come together under his or her vision and setting priorities, so too must the senates play a role, and indeed all of us, in guiding UBC forward to new levels of success under this governance model. Winston Churchill once described democracy as the worst form of government except all the others that have been tried. That quote can certainly be applied to bicameral governance of universities. Now, moving on from the serious issues of the past year and to some highlights of things that have come to my attention and that I've taken great interest in. If I haven't mentioned your particular project, bring it to my attention and we'll add it to my list. There's been a lot going on. So firstly, I want to say what an enormous success the undergraduate research event hosted by the Barber School was this past week. It's garnered a lot of attention, and from year to year that event goes on from strength to strength. The quality of our students' research work is astounding, and that doesn't happen without extraordinary professors and a wonderful team in the faculty who actually pull together that sort of an event. I'm also delighted to see the new data science major, which I think is very timely and is going to be an excellent new option for our undergraduate students. And I'm particularly thrilled to see the new MSc and PhD program in medical physics, which will launch in September this year and has been developed with the BC Cancer Agency's Centre for the Southern Interior. That's a wonderful community partnership, and it's building exactly the kind of things that we can, where we bring excellent academics to the table, and we partner with community partners to provide the kinds of practical experiences that will really enrich the program. And through doing that, we're going to improve the quality of healthcare. That's exactly the kind of reason why we're here. Creative and Critical Studies has gone from strength to strength in its Indigenous arts programming, and this summer is hosting an Indigenous Summer Intensive program, which looks to be a wonderful event featuring visiting studio artists who will be in residence here, taking on issues of reconciliation, decolonization, and indigenizing theoretical discourse. It's going to be great to have that community resident on our campus and sharing their ideas with us. Health and Social Development has national bragging rights about its nursing program right now. Our students aced the new National Council licensing exam with a 97% pass rate, compared to a national average of 80%. We are streets ahead of the rest of the pack. It's absolutely remarkable. So huge kudos to our nursing faculty. And the school's Aboriginal enrollment is also something to celebrate. Since 2011, Aboriginal student numbers have risen every year and in fact have more than doubled from 24 to now 49 students, with a remarkable retention rate of 93%. And that's the result of a wonderful multiple-pronged strategy on access to support those students coming into UBC. And thanks to everyone who's put that in place. I believe we now have approximately 20% of our nursing students from Aboriginal backgrounds. That's an extraordinary achievement. So kudos to the nursing faculty. And to the Faculty of Education, they have continued to do very bold work, envisioning a new program design and working out how to launch that program and at the same time continue to serve the students here who expected to be able to go into their existing program. They've done a fantastic job. The new BEd model is approved, and I'm going to congratulate them one more time for all the work that's been done. It's really very special. Now, if you were paying attention as you watched the board video meeting, or the videoed board meeting, you may have been watching where they approved the university budget. Not normally the most exciting piece of the agenda, but this year it included something new and I would say very exciting and probably transformational for this campus and for the other campus. And that is the creation of what is called an excellence fund on each campus to support our strategic goals and our ambition to be, at the very least, the best university in Canada. These funds will be used to support the recruitment and retention of exemplary faculty, students, and staff, the conduct of innovative, cutting-edge research, and an excellent student learning experience for all inside and outside the classroom. That's a very diverse set of areas to be invested in. The funds are coming from a portion of the international student fees, and the Excellence Fund on this campus will eventually yield us over $4 million a year for those kinds of strategic investments. It's going to ensure that we're able to make the kinds of investments that we want, prioritized through consultations with students, deans, and the Senate Budget Committee. It's going to enable us to aim higher and to achieve the high ambitions that we have set ourselves for this campus. I'd also like to just briefly mention the success of our partnership with MyTax. Now, I believe, just into its third year. Our local MyTax Director of Business Development, Jennifer Tedman-Jones, tells me that this past year was our best. There were more internships submitted this year than in the past 5 years combined. Now, I should say the 5 years is more than her time here because, of course, we've been MyTax partners for longer than Jennifer has been with us. Last year, we had over 100 research internships funded by MyTax. That's a lot for a campus of our size. That's amazing. So thank you to Jennifer and all the faculty who've taken on MyTax-funded students, and also to the community partners who are making this integrated partner university learning experience possible. So thinking about our community, and it is a very important piece of who we are, it's been an important year in regard to partnerships. Many of you will recall the event in September when we celebrated the renewal of our Memorandum of Understanding with the Okanagan Nation, and their appreciation when the chiefs spoke for the positive relationship we have and the work being done with the Anaukin Centre and the Kelowna Friendship Society. This is a great beginning, and we have a lot to work on as we move forward. More recently, we've been working to explore memoranda of understanding with both the City of Kelowna and the Regional District of Central Okanagan. We already have many areas where our work intersects with those two entities, and we have the Healthy City partnerships, and so in the health area. We see these broad agreements as supporting these existing points of engagement and allowing new ones to develop between the greater community of the region and our university. It's going to lay the groundwork for a lot more real impact of what we do here on this campus in our surrounding communities. As you may know, the university has partnered with our Students' Union to support Syrian refugees who want to study here. As you probably also know, there are now several Syrian families who have settled here in the Valley. And I understand that we already have some applications from students for September. That's a great beginning, and that's going to build another kind of diversity into our campus here. I'd like to give a shout out to our HR team, and I know that some of you are here today. They've won 3 major awards now for work on mental health through projects like Thrive Week. So there they are, the team back in the corner there. Most recently, they were recognized by the Canadian Mental Health Association for leadership, innovation, and excellence in maintaining and improving mental health. Building on this success and last year's Okanagan Charter on Health Promotion, I really do expect great things from our Wellbeing at UBC initiative. I think you've set a very high bar for what we can do here. I'd also like to celebrate perhaps the biggest achievement, certainly one with the big numbers and perhaps a huge impact of the last year, and that was the success of our Start an Evolution campaign, which closed in the fall and raised $100 million in the Okanagan. And in fact, we had the announcement for that in this very room last fall. That is entirely due to the work of our stellar development team and our alumni relations folks, led by Adrian Nolan, who's sitting right there. And I'd just like to give them a round of applause for $100 million. Now, I raise the campaign because every so often I am asked a question. Sometimes it's, so, what is UBC going to do with the $100 million? And sometimes it's, what am I going to do with the $100 million? I don't have it. We've pretty much spent it all. It's important to understand that this kind of a fundraising campaign happens over multiple years. And as the funds come in, the donors typically expect to see the funds being invested in whatever it is they're choosing to invest in. So, for example, over 3,300 generous donors established 200 new scholarships and bursaries during the campaign. That's really changing the face of the kind of support that we can give our students. In addition to raising funds for students and endowed student aid, the funds raised were also applied to facilities and equipment, to academic programs and research programs, and some of them are invested in perpetuity in the formation of endowments. It's a beginning for our campus. The other campus has $1 billion endowment. I think over $1 billion. I think we have maybe 20 million now in our endowment. So we have a hill to climb. But I am delighted to say that even though the campaign, the official campaign, has closed, we continue to see funds coming in, and we continue to raise funds, I think, at nearly the same rate that we were bringing them in during the campaign, and we are aiming even higher. The library remains our top physical infrastructure priority, as does support for students, both undergraduate and graduate, and we're very actively working on these. Let me say just a few words about the campus, the physical campus. As many of you will have noticed, work has finally begun on completing the John Hindle Drive. That will absolutely change that side of our campus as that roadway comes through. It will deliver one of several safe cycling routes to campus that we hope to see completed over the coming months and years. Following the completion of the John Hindle Drive connection, we will be able to proceed with pedestrianization of University Way between this building and the UNC to create a vibrant Main Street plaza that will be completely pedestrian and closed to traffic. It'll be a first step towards creating a more pedestrian-friendly campus. A Main Street will be a perfect site for our wonderful new rainbow staircase, something that was inaugurated this month. And you can't miss it, really. It is something that I'd like to thank the Students' Union, the Pride Resource Center, and the Equity and Inclusion Office's Positive Space Committee for taking the big step towards representing the inclusive campus that we aspire to be. And finally, although she couldn't join us today, I want to offer enormous thanks to Interim President Martha Piper for having set the foundations for this campus's success more than 10 years ago. It's been an extraordinary and, of course, unexpected privilege to have the opportunity to work with the president who established our campus. I will say I now have a much better understanding of our origins, and I have sometimes in the past 4 years thought, what were they thinking? And I have been able to ask that question, and she has answered it. And I have to say, I have a much better idea of her vision for this place, and I will say that in every conversation that we have had, she has always ended up reinforcing how incredibly overwhelmed she is by the impact and success that we in fact have had, far beyond what she says she would have imagined in our first decade. So that's been very heartening, and I think it's something that really is all down to you. It's all down to our community. And I want to thank every one of you who's here today and all of our colleagues for the extraordinary work, some will say the heavy lifting, of getting us to where we are today. And to coming in today and every other day to work at UBC to ensure that we really do deliver on our promise and make this place the outstanding academic community for our students and our colleagues that we know we can be. So thank you so much, and now I think we will have some questions.
So we'll invite Dr. Doberstein to come down, and they'll take their seats at the lovely table here. I have a roaming microphone, so I will bring the microphone around to you if you have a question. But I think Carrie will start with a few questions. So I'll turn it over to you.
Can everyone hear me? Good. So thank you for your remarks, Professor Buzzard, and for once again daring to take some live questions from us. I have some doozies. No, I don't. So I'm relatively new to this campus, and I've never been to a DVC town hall before, so I went on to ubcotv.tv to see previous ones, and I quickly discovered a pattern. It seems as though the first question you have to be asked is a John Hindle Drive-related grievance or some other transportation issue. So I just want us to savor this moment. Given that that issue seems to be resolved, you don't have to answer a question about it. Unless you really want to.
Yeah, you have to say, yes, you're right. It's dogged this discussion for a very long, this conversation for a long time. And I am delighted to see John Hindle coming to fruition after all these years. It's not the only thing. The Bullman Road access is also being moved ahead very quickly by the city, and that will take people off the highway overpass and then underneath the highway on a safe route to campus. And I also noticed that the railway ties and rails are rapidly gone. And what's left is what looks like a perfectly flat, cyclable, compressed gravel pathway. Now, I'm sure it needs some work, but at least wouldn't involve cycling over the railway ties. But it's all, I think it's all coming, which is very exciting.
Great.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hog the first couple questions, but I want you thinking of your own questions for me to follow on in a moment. So you briefly mentioned a few changes to graduate programs on campus. And so most of us faculty were trained in very big graduate programs that were highly resourced. And we can compete to get big external grants here as faculty, but perhaps hit a barrier in terms of attracting graduate training opportunities, and human talent we can draw on to support our research projects. So as you look towards the next 10 years of UBCO, what's your vision for graduate education on campus?
Well, like you, I was in a graduate program where I was one of 23 PhD students being supervised by one person. So I didn't get much of his time. But so I can understand the value and culture of having a large research group. And it's an issue on this campus because we simply don't have that scale of departments. And what I'm seeing as we move forward is that graduate program directors and others are looking at opportunities to connect across the institution and take advantage of the depth and breadth that we have if we look at both campuses together. So we have recently conducted a review of graduate studies, and there's a review of both graduate studies as a whole and of IGS. Those will be forthcoming, and I can't speak to the details, but I do know that strengthening our capacity to deliver a quality program on this campus is important. And I was approached by actually Sally Otto, who heads up the Biodiversity Institute in Vancouver, and she and I happened to be in Ottawa with a UBC delegation, and she came to say hello to me. We hadn't met before, and she said, you know, we have a great working relationship with Braze on this campus and with Lael Parrott and her group, and it's really difficult to connect because we don't have good video linkages. If we had better linkages, we'd be able to share visiting speakers, share seminars, maybe have some joint graduate courses that both sets of students and profs would benefit from. And, you know, just by chance, it happens that the provost in Vancouver has funding to establish better video linkages. So for that regard, if anyone is thinking that they are already working with a partner in Vancouver and you want to invest in building a better bridge, there may be funding to help support that. But I think that's an example of the kind of way we can build our strength. There are wonderful things about being on a small campus, but I do agree that it's limiting for some of the graduate student experience. So we have to work on that.
Your answer sort of connected to my next question about the integration between the two campuses. In some respects, they're really quite well integrated. In other respects, it's underdeveloped. So I come from U of T, which is also a multi-campus model, and it's quite well integrated. I'm wondering where you see us headed in that regard, in terms of academics or administration. The reason I ask is because I was a beneficiary of what I think is a really great example of integration across the campuses. That's the Spark internal review for external grants. So I had a colleague in political science in Vancouver review my application. I did the same for a Vancouver colleague this year, really sort of harnessing the expertise of both campuses. So, but I mean, in every other respect, the political science departments, and I imagine other departments, are totally isolated from each other. So what do you think about the next steps for campus integration?
Well, you know, the greatest universities that I know are open to collaboration with other great institutions. So the very idea that we should have closed walls between ourselves within UBC is not rational to me. I think that in our first decade, it was important that we established an independent presence and a capacity to function fully as a campus. But going forward, clearly we've got to capitalize on the strengths that we have everywhere. And so the kinds of interactions between the biodiversity groups on both campuses and the kinds of interactions that go on, I know, in engineering and in health across the university campuses, I think we'll see those expanding. The appointment of Phil Barker, who's up there as our VP Research, he's the Vice Principal Research on this campus, and he's the Associate Vice President to the Vice President Research for the whole system. That's a first that we've made that connection. And Phil is already taking control of the innovation agenda for all of UBC. And he has both system functions and functions here. And I think what you experience with Spark, we will see more of as we realize the big questions need very often interdisciplinary teams, even within a discipline. And so it's very likely that we'll want to support more of that sort of thing in research. Behind the scenes, in terms of the administrative functions of the university, development, alumni engagement, HR, finance, really those are very highly integrated. We benefit enormously on this campus from being able to have, for example, world-class campus planners and architects who work for UBC, the cost of whom is defrayed over 55,000 students. If we were to try to have, an architect planner of that caliber for this campus, we'd never be able to afford it. And so the benefits of being part of the bigger institution are significant. And we definitely, I think, benefit from that kind of leadership that's available to us. On the academic side, I think the faculties are in various ways starting to explore potentials for partnership and different relationships. And I think that's something that will develop in this decade.
Great.
Thank you for bringing up the issue of cycling access to the university. And I just wanted to ask the DVC if she was aware that there's going to be a 2-year hiatus where we will no longer have any legal access through Curtis Road, even though currently the only people able to use that access are in the medical building and in the CCS building. That legal access will stop for 2 years while John Hindle Drive is being built, and which is a really big problem for those of us who rely on cycling access or pedestrian access as well. That's one thing. The other is the Rails to Trail plan is going to be funded by fundraising, and they won't actually start the trail until they have funding for the entire trail from Kelowna to Vernon. So we certainly aren't going to be getting that in any big hurry. As we do have legal access to Curtis Road for at least 2 parts of the campus, perhaps there is something that could be done, perhaps, to aid us in guarding that access while John Hindle is being built, which will, of course, convenience all the car traffic, but won't help very much for people.
Well, my understanding is John Hindle has multi-use pathway as part of the John Hindle Road, and at the same time, Academy Way is being taken all the way through to, I want to say the road at the end is Sexsmith. I'm not sure if that's correct, yes? So there will be the road will be accessible from Sexsmith over Academy Way to the university. My understanding of the road construction issue is that, you know, when it becomes a construction site, it simply will not be possible to have access through where they are blasting and creating the new roadway. So I don't know that there's a way of thinking about an alternative to how Curtis Road could somehow be bridged for that. But it's my understanding that the access via Academy Way should be available, in fact must be available, before they start really the major part of construction, because otherwise the people who are using currently Academy Way to come down and access the highway would be stuck. So that other road must be completed before they really break up the link that is the Academy Way link.
The fact remains that we will either have to climb up at the very end of a long journey, we will be climbing up to the top of a hill and back down again. That's one option, which is not going to encourage any cyclists or pedestrians. And the eliminating the access for, at least I've been told by the city that it is a 2-year hiatus. It sounds to me as if cycling is going to be seriously discouraged, going from a very, very poor access to virtually none. And I feel that it would be really, really helpful if the university could somehow get behind the Rails to Trails or some solution for cyclists.
It is certainly our intention to very much get behind the Rails to Trails. And I will say that we already hold a small amount of funds that we will be contributing from a fund that we've had for some time to improve that access. But I believe there's a city consultation coming up shortly on the John Hindle process. Is that right, Anthony?
Thanks. Well, maybe I can clarify a couple of things there. That there's certainly an open house coming up in May at some stage, and when that is announced, we'll make sure the campus community is well aware of that, so they can see the most up-to-date set of plans and all the temporary solutions that we're working with the city on. So the 2-year time period that was mentioned is a period that's going to be phased in. The construction of the project, roughly between 1.5 years, 2 years. There's going to be a number of different phases that we don't know yet. We're still waiting to hear back from the city. So a number of alternative solutions, both for pedestrians, vehicles, and cyclists, will be made through the design of that project. So we're looking forward to hopefully seeing as many of the campus out to the open house in May as possible.
Thank you.
We thought we wouldn't have questions about Curtis Road.
Patterns never change.
We have one more.
Any other questions?
Hello, my name is Brian. It's not so much as a question as just to reinforce that people have to understand that as cyclists, We travel at all times of day, light, dark, all kinds of weather, snow, rain, wind, sun, whatever it may be. And I understand that John Hindle has to be constructed, but the alternatives that are before us are not safe. And I think it's really, really important to reestablish that link as soon as possible, i.e. whatever the university can do to get that tunnel in ASAP, get construction fences up to segregate the traffic from the construction so that we can get through there as safe as possible. Long Hill, I can count on, you know, I've had many close calls with cars pulling out of the side road and almost rear-ending their bumper because they don't see us. You look at the vehicles that you see down in the ditch there on the right-hand side as you round the cemetery corner there. And if you can only imagine what that would be like in the wintertime with traffic going by you. Yeah, I know, there's people that say we shouldn't be on the road, but you know, for many people, it's their only way here, it's their only way of commuting, and it's what we require to stay safe and go home to our families at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the floor? While you think, I'll ask another one. I'm coming back to you though. So as a political scientist, I can't resist asking you publicly to comment on the recent federal election results and the resultant government turnover in the context of post-secondary education in Canada, and any opportunities you see on the horizon as it relates to UBCO.
Well, I will say that, of course, it was a great shock, I think, to everybody that we locally elected a Liberal member of Parliament. I have to say, although he's very new to the job, he is wonderfully supportive of what we're trying to do here, tremendously engaged and interested in what we're trying to do. So it's great. I mean, you know, Ron Cannon was also a great booster and supporter of our campus, but Stephen Fuhrer is going to be another great MP for us to have, and it's very important to have visibility in Ottawa, I think. As far as the budget goes, I would say that the post-secondary sector has probably not had a budget that friendly in the last, certainly the last decade, perhaps even the last 20 years. We are seeing a $2 billion infrastructure investment fund, which has just been rolled out. And it's come out with a very short deadline. It was announced that it was planned in the budget, but it's been recently sent out, and we now have the forms. We have about a 2-week period to submit our projects, but I can tell you that our library is our #1 project, and it is the top 2 for all of UBC. So we're putting our library project in to get funding, and we're also putting in other infrastructure projects, including increased high-head lab space for our engineering students, and various infrastructure projects to make the campus more sustainable with our geothermal heating system expansion and so on. So I think our proposal into the government is somewhere under $50 million worth of projects. So that's sort of a Christmas gift from the budget. There were several other very good news pieces. From the students' perspective, I think that what the Liberals are doing with support for student funding in terms of addressing it more to families at lower income is a much better use of scarce resources. I don't think tax credits for the better off are as effective as spending the money directly on families that are in real need. There was a good investment back into the granting councils to support research, and for the first time the investment came without sort of strings about being, you know, you had to be attached to industry or that it had to be in a particular sector. So overall I think it was a very wise and thoughtful budget to invest, and the idea of investing $2 billion in improving infrastructure in post-secondary, including the colleges, I believe is a wonderful investment for the future of Canada, because it'll help us all prepare our students better for their futures and their careers. So I think it's a very good start, and we know that the government has said they are going to work very actively on innovation and the link between knowledge creation and social economic development. We see that as a really important piece, and it's something that our team of deans and Vice Principal Research and myself have been giving a lot of thought to how we can take the enormous investment that has been put to put UBC here in the Okanagan, and how can we turn this into positive economic and social development for a region like the interior of BC. I think that's an interesting question of application, of picking areas of focus, and also on what kinds of policies we need to make that possible. So the government, when I was lucky enough to go with Philip Barker, we went to meet with various people in the ministries involved. They're very open to us coming forward with our ideas. That's another nice thing I think about this current government. You know, we have Tim Kruper as our inside man. So, you know, he's very helpful. But I think it was a great budget from our perspective. Unfortunately, it doesn't translate into the provincial government increasing our grant. But yeah, perhaps you could work on that.
I promise not to ask you about the upcoming election in the provinces. We'll wait till it's done. Yeah. Any other questions from the floor?
Any comments?
Any comments? Yeah.
Sure, I'll ask this one. We are in a bit of a classroom crunch. Is there any initiatives coming forward to increase the access or availability of especially large classroom space coming down the pipes?
I'm so glad you asked that question. The library expansion project, and you know the students have contributed $10 million towards expanding the library facilities. Our plan in expanding that space is to, we're going to build out behind the library towards the Students' Union building, and that will include a new 400-seat classroom. A 400-seat classroom will allow us to teach some of our very large classes in, 2 sections instead of 4, and will free up classrooms all the way down in a sort of trickle-down effect to make more of the large and the mid-size classrooms available. And we believe that it will actually free up some of the smaller classrooms, which we might then be able to translate into graduate students' rooms, laboratories, more office space, studio space, as we move the classes up into better-sized classrooms. So it is part of that infrastructure project that we're asking the federal government for. I should say that this library project, as you know, came to be, it has been our top priority since I got here. And for the last 3 years, we have been very actively lobbying the provincial government through the Ministry of Advanced Education, and have, basically tried to sell them the project over the last 3 years. It was our earnest hope that the commitment of our students to themselves put up $10 million would have the province come to the table. But as you may have noticed, the investments that the provincial government have been making in universities or in post-secondary education have tended to be very much around the trades. So we keep pushing, and we're optimistic that this new federal program will allow us to actually get the job done. The plans are developing. We have a pretty solid budget. We have what's called a functional plan. We just need the money.
More comments? Questions? Well, bail me out.
All right. We're done.
Well, then we're done. Thanks very much for coming. Thanks very much for your remarks.
Thank you.